Everyone warned me to stay away from my ex-wife. I knocked on her door anyway, and she opened it like she'd been waiting 2 years. No who is it. No chain. No hesitation. Barefoot, pencil in her hand, at 11 o'clock at night. Like she'd left that door unlocked for 730 days, waiting for one specific knock. My name is Grady Winslow. I'm 36. I build timber frames in Rowan Falls, Ohio. And 2 years ago, Maren Vaughn stood in a kitchen I built with my own 2 hands and told me she never loved me, that she'd stayed for the security, that she'd been counting the years. She said it well. She said it in front of enough people that this whole town still repeats it. So they warned me. My brother Deke warned me. He's the one who brought me a blanket the winter I slept in my truck. My mother warned me, 68 years old, hands flat on her table, saying she wouldn't watch me starve twice. Even Maren's own sister warned me, but her warning wasn't to protect me. Hers was, she's finally okay. Don't undo her. 3 people who love me. 3 warnings. Every one of them true. But none of them could explain the storage unit, because that morning a man rolled up a door on Route 9, and inside it was my dead grandfather's entire workshop. Every tool I sold in one furious afternoon because I wanted to feel nothing. Cleaned. Labeled in handwriting I'd know underwater. And oiled. 2 years of oiling a dead man's tools. 2 years of payments. Never once late. Signed, Vaughn. So here's what I need you to sit with. If she never loved me, why was she paying $118 a month to keep my grandfather alive in a metal box on Route 9? Why did she stop asking who was at the door? What was she writing in that notebook when I knocked? And why did a woman who told this whole town she'd been counting the years down open that door like she'd been counting them up? It started with a letter I almost threw away. Certified mail. Green card. I had to sign for it standing in the rain in my work boots, with sawdust still in my hair, and I remember thinking it was the county wanting money, because that's usually what an envelope like that means. It wasn't the county. Prentice Self-Storage, Route 9. Notice of facility closure. Unit 114 must be vacated by the 30th. Contents will be disposed of. Account holder, Grady Winslow. My name. I read it 4 times standing in the rain. I've never rented a storage unit in my life. I own 41 acres. I have a barn. Men like me don't rent storage. We have too much space and not enough sense to fill it. So I drove out there to tell Ollie Prentice he'd made a mistake. Route 9 in the morning smells like diesel and wet gravel. Ollie's place is 9 rows of rusted orange doors behind a chain-link fence, and Ollie himself is about 70, wearing a jacket older than me, holding a clipboard like it's a hymnal. 114, he said. Yeah, that one's been here a while. It's not mine, says Winslow. I'm telling you it's not mine. He shrugged the way old men shrug when they've decided to let the world be wrong. He walked me down the row. His keys made that sound keys make. And he bent down, and he grabbed the handle, and he rolled up that door, and my heart stopped in my chest like a truck hitting a wall. It was my grandfather's shop. All of it. The 1937 lathe, with the crack in the tailstock. The bench with the burn mark, shaped like Ohio, where Ellis Winslow set down a hot iron in 1974 and never forgave himself. The wall of hand planes. The gouges. The marking gauge. The chisels in their canvas roll. The clamps. The wooden mallets he made himself out of hickory, worn smooth and shiny by a dead man's hands. Every single piece. Every single piece I sold. Because here's the part I don't like telling. 2 years ago, 7 days after my wife told me she'd never loved me, I went into my grandfather's shop with a coffee can full of rage, and I put the whole thing up for sale in one afternoon. Called a number, took $11,000 from a stranger, watched a truck haul away 70 years of a man's life. I didn't do it for money. I did it because I wanted to feel nothing, and that shop was the last thing left in the world that could still make me feel something. I burned it down. That's what I did. I just did it with a phone. And now I was standing in a metal box on Route 9 staring at all of it. But that's not what broke me. What broke me was that everything was clean. Every tool was hanging. Every blade was bright. Somebody had built racks. Cheap pine, but square, but level, and hung that whole shop on the walls of a storage unit like a museum nobody ever visited. And under every tool, a little tag, white cardstock, Handwriting I would know underwater. Handwriting I would know if you woke me from a dead sleep and showed me one letter of it. Ellis's jointer. Do not oil the sole. G says it makes it slip. I reached out and I touched the plane and my fingers came back slick. Somebody had oiled it. Somebody had been oiling my dead grandfather's tools for 2 years in a metal box on Route 9. I turned around and my voice didn't sound like mine. Ollie, who's paying for this? He flipped a page, licked his thumb, flipped another. Old men are not built for moments like this. Been paid every month since the spring before last, he said. 118 a month. Never late once. Not one time. He tapped the page. Vaughn. And the whole world went quiet. What? Vaughn, he said again. Marin, you need to understand what that name does to me. Marin Vaughn stood in my kitchen. A kitchen I built, with cabinets I cut from a walnut my grandfather planted. And she told me she had never loved me. She said she stayed for the security. She said she'd been counting the years. She said it flat, like reading a grocery list. And when I asked her to say it again because I genuinely thought my ears had broken, she said it again, slower. Then she filed, fast, cold, signed everything without a fight. Didn't ask for $1, didn't ask for the house, didn't even ask for the mixer her mother gave her. And she said it loud enough, in a small enough town, that 6 weeks later my own barber knew. Rowan Falls has 3,000 people, and 1 traffic light, and total recall. This town decided who Marin Vaughn was, in about 9 days. Cold, calculating. Used him up, threw him out, and I let them. God help me, I let them, because at least when they hated her I didn't have to. I slept in my truck for 5 weeks that November. I'm not proud of it. I had a house with a bed in it, and I could not walk through the door because she'd painted the hallway. My brother Deke brought me a blanket. He didn't say anything. He just knocked on the window at midnight, handed me a blanket through the gap, and walked back to his car. That's Deke. That's who he is. So when I told him about the storage unit, standing in his driveway with the letter in my hand, he didn't even let me finish. No. Deke. No. He put down the socket wrench. Grady, I brought you a blanket. In November, you were sleeping in a truck in November like a dog, and I brought you a blanket, and I sat in my car afterward, and cried like a kid. And I have never told you that until right now. He was shaking. My big loud brother, 41 years old, shaking in a driveway. So whatever's in that box, he said, let it get bulldozed. Let it get burned. I don't care if it's the crown jewels. You do not go to Persimmon Street. Then my mother, Bertie Winslow, 68, in her kitchen, and she didn't yell. That's the thing about my mother. The day she stops yelling is the day you should be afraid. She put both hands flat on the table. Flat, like she was bracing for something. I watched you not eat for a year, she said. A year, Grady. I'd bring a casserole and come back 3 days later, and there'd be a fork in it. 1 fork mark. Mom, I am 68 years old. Her voice cracked, and she hated it. I'm asking you, as your mother, not as a woman with an opinion, as your mother. Don't. And I said okay. I said it to her face. I said okay, Mom. And I got in my truck to drive home. But I didn't drive home. I stopped downtown, because I'm a coward, and cowards stall. And that's where Delphine Vaughn found me. Marin's little sister, Del. 30 years old, built like a fence post, meanest kind eyes you ever saw. She was standing outside the old bakery storefront on Depot Street, the one with Vaughn still ghosted on the brick where the sign used to be. And she saw my truck, and she came across that street like weather. I rolled the window down because I've known her since she was 8. Ollie Prentice called my sister this morning, she said. So I already know. Del, don't. She put her hand on my door. Everybody's been telling you to stay away for 2 years, Grady. And you never listened. Not really. You just did what you were told, which is different. That's not fair. I'm not here to be fair. And here's where her voice changed, and something cold went down my back. I'm here to tell you something they can't. Everybody else is warning you to protect you. She leaned in. I'm warning you to protect her. I couldn't speak. She's okay now, Del said, and her chin was going. You have no idea what it took. 2 years. 2 years to get her to okay. And it is thin, Grady. It is a sheet of ice you could put a thumb through. She stepped back off my truck. So if you knock on that door and you're not staying, if you go over there to get an answer, and feel better, and drive home, I will never forgive you as long as I live, and I'll mean it. Then she said one more thing. Quiet. Almost like she didn't want to. And Grady? She stopped asking. Stopped asking what? Dell's face did something I'd never seen on a Vaughn. Who's at the door? She said. She used to always ask. 2 years ago she just stopped, and she walked away. 3 people who love me. 3 warnings. Not one of them wrong about anything. Except the tools. I sat in that truck until the streetlights came on, and I thought about $118 a month. Because here's what nobody understood. Not Deke. Not my mother. Not this whole gossiping town. She was broke. I know what she made. I know she sold her mother's house. I know she sold the bakery. I know she worked nights out at the distribution center, the same Route 9 as that storage unit. Isn't that something? She drove past my grandfather every night at 11 o'clock, and did books during the day for the hardware store and the vet and the Methodist church. A woman like that does not have $118 a month. A woman like that has $118 a month for food. 24 months, 24 payments, never late, not once. You can lie to a town. You can lie to a man in a kitchen. You can lie so well the whole county repeats it back to you for 2 years like a hymn. But nobody oils a dead man's tools for 2 years, out of spite. So at 10:40 at night, I started the truck. Persimmon Street is 1 block long, and it dead ends at the old laundromat. There's an outside staircase up the side of the building, metal, loose in the bolts, and it rings like a bell when you climb it. I climbed it slow anyway. 1 window lit, yellow, small, and I stood on that landing at 11 o'clock at night, 36 years old, a grown man who builds houses out of trees, and I could not lift my hand. I thought about Deke, crying in his car. I thought about 1 fork mark in a casserole. I thought about Dell saying thin as a sheet of ice. And then I thought about a little white tag in handwriting I'd know underwater. G. Says it makes it slip. Present tense. Says, 2 years later, and she was still writing about me in present tense. I knocked, and I swear to you, the door opened before my hand came down. No, who is it? No chain, no footsteps even. Like she'd been standing right there her whole life. Marin Vaughn. Barefoot. Gray work shirt. Hair up in a pencil, and another pencil in her hand. 34 years old, and thinner than she should be, and her eyes went straight to my face, like she'd been holding the exact shape of it in her hands for 2 years. She didn't say, "What are you doing here?" She didn't say, "It's late." Behind her the whole table was covered in paper, a notebook open under the lamp, pages and pages of somebody's handwriting. She looked at me for a long second, and then she said, so quiet I almost missed it, "Okay, just that. Okay." Like a woman who'd been braced every single day for 730 days, and today was finally the day. That's where I have to stop for a second, because that word "okay" is the whole story, and I didn't understand it yet. I thought she meant "okay, you found out." I thought she meant "okay, you caught me." It took me 9 more days and a piece of paper at the county courthouse to understand what she actually meant. She meant, "Okay, it's over. I can finally stop." But I didn't know that on the landing. On the landing, I was still a man with 2 years of poison in him and a storage unit receipt in my fist. So I did the thing I'd regret. I said, "Why are my grandfather's tools in a metal box on Route 9? And she didn't flinch. She just stepped back from the door, opened it wider, like she'd rehearsed this, like she'd been rehearsing it in that one room 1,000 nights, while a truck she thought was mine went by on Persimmon Street. "Come in, Grady," she said. "And here's what I want you to sit with before I tell you what happened inside." There was 1 mug on that table, but there were 2 chairs, and one of them was pulled out. I went in. Her whole life fit in 1 room. That's the first thing that hit me. A bed against 1 wall, made tight as a soldier's. A hot plate. A sink with 1 plate in it. A window with no curtain, because curtains cost money, and it smelled like bread. That's what wrecked me before she said a single word. 22 square feet of nothing, and the whole place smelled like her mother's kitchen. Yeast and butter and warm sugar. At 11 at night, in a room with no oven in it. I didn't understand that yet either. "Sit," she said. I didn't sit. I stood there with my hat in my hands like a man at a funeral, and I looked at that table. The notebook was open. Green cover. The cheap kind. Corners soft from handling. And it was full. Front to back. Both sides of every page. Small, tight handwriting crawling all the way into the margins. And down the middle of the page, in the lamplight, I saw one word. Grandfather. I put my hand on the notebook and she said, "Don't." First thing she'd said in 2 years with any heat in it. I looked up. "Don't," she said again, softer. "Not yet. Ask me your question first. You came here with a question. Ask it." So I asked it. 24 payments. I said, 118 a month. You sold your mother's house. You sold the bakery. You work nights at a warehouse on Route 9, and you live in a room with one plate in the sink. She didn't move. So where does a woman like that find $118 a month? And Marin Vaughn looked at me and said, "The same place anybody finds anything, Grady." She stops eating lunch. I want to tell you I said something good right then. I didn't. Because 2 years of poison doesn't drain out of a man because a woman says something true. 2 years of poison finds the true thing and it gets angrier. "Don't," I said. "You asked. Don't you dare stand there and be noble at me." My voice came out shaking, and I hated it. "You want me to feel sorry for you? You want me to stand in this room and feel sorry for you? No. Then why?" And she said, "Because they were your grandfathers. You said you never loved me." It came out of me like something breaking. I heard it hit the walls of that little room. Downstairs, the laundromat sign buzzed, and Marin Vaughn stood in front of me with her hands at her sides, and she took it. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just took it, and I watched her take it, and something in the way she took it made me understand. With a cold drop straight through my stomach, she was practiced at this. Somebody who's been yelled at once flinches. Somebody who's been yelled at for 2 years just gets very, very still. "Grady," she said, "you stood in my kitchen. I know where I stood. Cabinets I cut from a tree my grandpa planted in 1961. I built that room. I built the room, Marin. And you stood in the middle of it and you told me you'd been counting the years. I know. You said it twice. I know. Why?" And that's when she said the thing that started the 9 days. She said, "Because it worked." I want you to understand what happened in my chest right then. Because I finally heard it. Not "it was true." Not "I meant it." Not "I'm sorry." It worked. Like a plan. Like a tool. Like something a person picks up and uses because it does the job. I set the storage receipt on her table. My hand wasn't steady. "What worked?" I said, and Marin went to the window. Put her fingers on the frame, and she talked to the glass, because I think she'd only ever been able to say it to glass. "Do you remember," she said, "what you said when I told you about my mother's loan? Marin, do you remember what you said?" Exactly. I remembered. Of course I remembered. Her mother had been in the ground 11 days. Odile Vaughn, who could charm a bank president out of his shoes and did, repeatedly, for 11 years, on a note her 22-year-old daughter signed once at a kitchen table without reading it. $186,400. In Marin's name. Only Marin's name. And I remember I laughed. Not mean. Relieved. Because I thought, "Oh, is that all it is?" I thought somebody was dying. I said, "Sell the land." I told her. You said it in 4 seconds. She still hadn't turned around. I counted. I actually counted, Grady. 4 seconds. I told you a number that would end most people's lives, and it took you 4 seconds to give away 41 acres. Because it's dirt. And she turned around. And there it was. 2 years of it. All at once. Right in her face. "It is not dirt," she said. "Marin. It is not dirt. And don't you ever say that to me again." Her voice was low, and it was breaking, and it was the most alive I'd seen her since the kitchen. "You were 9 years old on your grandfather's tailgate. You told me that on our 3rd date. You told me you used to walk that tree line in the winter and pretend you owned it. Stop. You touched the door frames, Grady." She was crying now, and still not stopping. "When you think nobody's looking, you come in the front, and you put 2 fingers on that frame, like you're checking a pulse. 6 years I watched you do that. 6 years. So you left me. So I made it so you couldn't. And there it was. That land was the only thing in the world you ever wanted before you wanted me, she said. And you would have handed it to a bank in 4 seconds to pay for a mistake I made when I was 22 years old, and too dumb to read a piece of paper. And every day for the rest of your life, you'd have said you were fine. Her hands were shaking. And you would have been fine. That's the worst part. You'd have been fine and I'd have had to watch you be fine for 40 years. Now here's where a lesser man tells you he understood. I didn't understand. I got angrier. And I want to be honest about that, because I think it's the truest thing in this whole story. I said, so you decided. She stopped. You decided, I said again. By yourself. In a room I wasn't in. Grady. No. Say it. You looked at a problem and you looked at me, and you decided I couldn't handle the answer. You decided I was too stupid to know what my own land was worth against my own wife. That is what it is. And I was crying too now, which made me madder. Marin, I had one good thing in my whole life. One. Not the land. I don't care about the land. You never once understood that. Grady, the one good thing I ever got to do was choose you over it. That was mine. That was the one decision that belonged to me, and you took it out of my hands and made it for me in a room I wasn't in. She had nothing. Nothing at all. She stood there with her mouth open. And then, I said, just to make it stick, just to make sure I never came back and undid your good work, you made me hate myself. For 2 years, you didn't just leave, you made sure I'd be glad you left. You made sure every man in this town would slap my back and say, dodged one there, Winslow. I know what I did. That's not love, Marin. Grady, that's arrogance wearing love's coat. And that landed. I watched it land. I watched it go into her, like something with a point on it. And I watched her not defend herself, because there was no defense, because I was right. And that's the thing nobody tells you. Being right is the loneliest place there is. I walked out. She said my name once. Just once. At the top of that metal staircase. At 11:40 at night on Persimmon Street. I kept walking. 9 days. That's what the letter said. The 30th. Everything out of Unit 114, or it goes in a dumpster. And here's the joke God played on me. It was her contract and my tools. She couldn't throw them away, and I couldn't touch them. A locked box with 2 people's names on it. So the next morning at 7, I pulled into Route 9. Her car was already there. Little green thing, rust through the rocker panel, trunk open, and Marin Vaughn in work gloves, alone, trying to get a 1937 lathe onto a furniture dolly by herself. Neither of us said good morning. We just worked. That's what I remember most about those 9 days. Not talking, working. 2 people who used to share a bed, passing a 140-pound cast-iron tailstock hand to hand, careful not to touch fingers, careful not to breathe wrong. Her hands. God, her hands. She used to have soft hands. Baker's hands. Now they were cracked across the knuckles, and there was a split at the base of her thumb that kept opening up. And every time she gripped something, she'd wince about 1/10 of an inch. I watched her wince about 400 times in 9 days, and never once say a word about it. Day 1, we cleared the west wall. Day 2, we cleared the racks. Day 3, I found the coffee can. It was on the bench. Old Folger's can, red, rusted at the rim. My grandpa kept pencils in it. I'd have known it in the dark. I picked it up expecting pencils. There was a notebook in it. A second one. Older. Cover taped at the spine. And I opened it standing in that storage unit with my thumb still dirty from the lathe. And I read the first line. And my legs went out from under me. Ellis's marking gauge. G. Says his grandfather could scribe a line in the dark. By feel. And never miss. G. Cried a little, telling me this, and pretended it was sawdust. Except I sat down on the concrete. I turned the page. Ellis's mallet. The small one. G. Says Ellis made it out of a hickory that came down in the storm the year G's dad left. G says a man should make his own mallet at least once. G has not made one. I don't think G knows he hasn't. Page after page after page. Ellis's jointer. Do not oil the sole. G says it makes it slip. Ellis's #4. G was 11 when he was allowed to touch this one. He remembers the exact day. Tuesday. Ellis's chisel roll. There are 9 and there should be 10. G lost the 1/4 when he was 12 and never told his grandfather. He has never told anyone but me. He still looks for it. 22 pages. 22 pages of a dead man's tools and every single story I ever told her about them. Written down by a woman who knew she was going to leave. She wasn't cataloging the shop. She was saving my grandfather. Because she knew, sitting in that room I wasn't in, doing her arithmetic, she knew that when she was gone, there would be nobody left in the world who remembered that the chisel roll should have 10. She was afraid I'd forget him, and she knew she wouldn't be there to remind me. I sat on the floor of a storage unit on Route 9 for 40 minutes, and I could not get up. Day 4, I did the worst thing I have ever done in my life. The diner. Wednesday. 11 people in there. Marin came in for coffee, and Deke was at the counter. And my brother who brought me a blanket, turned around on that stool and said, loud, so the whole room got it. They're tearing down that storage place, huh? What a shame. Where's she gonna keep her conscience? The room laughed. The whole room laughed. And I was standing right there. And I said nothing. I watched Marin Vaughn put $2 on the counter, pick up a cup she no longer wanted, and walk out of that diner with her back straight. And I watched 11 people watch her go. And I did not open my mouth. You know what got me? She wasn't surprised. She had a routine for it. $2 down, don't rush, don't look, straight back, out. She had done that so many times over 2 years that it had become a skill. I went out to my truck and put my forehead on the wheel and stayed there so long the engine went cold. 2 years, I let this town eat her alive so I wouldn't have to feel anything. I didn't just let it happen. I needed it to happen. Day 5. Ruth Ann Pike cornered me at the hardware store. 81 years old, 4'11", a purse like a cinder block. Grady Winslow, she said, how's your pie? Ma'am, your pie, the cherry, comes in the tin with the blue lid. My mother had been bringing me that pie for 2 years. Every couple weeks. Church ladies, she said. Somebody's dropping it at the church. Ruth Ann looked up at me with those bright little eyes. She never stopped baking, she said. Sells it out the back of that green car. 6 in the morning. Church parking lot. Dee's recipes, every one. Been feeding this town for 2 years. The floor tilted. And this town, Ruth Ann said, has been calling that woman cold with her own pie in its mouth. She patted my arm and went to buy her light bulbs. That's why the room smelled like bread. Day 6 was my mother. She called me over, sat me at that table, put both hands flat, and Bertie Winslow said, I have to tell you something and then you can hate me. Mom, 2 years ago, her mouth was already going. 2 years ago, that girl came to my porch. Everything in me went still. 2 days after she filed, stood on my porch. And she asked me, Grady, she said, Bertie, would you look after him? Please. He won't eat when he's hurt. Would you please look after him? My mother's face came apart, and I told her to get off my porch. Mom, I said get off my porch, and don't ever come to my door again. She was sobbing now. My mother, 68 years old. And she said okay. She said thank you. And she walked back to that little green car, and she sat in it. In my driveway. She sat in it a long while before she could drive it. She grabbed my hand across the table. I have thought about that car every day for 2 years, my mother said. Every single day I'd bring you a casserole and I'd get in my own car and I'd think about her sitting in mine. And then she said it. Grady, she came to my door to make sure somebody would feed you. She was arranging your dinner. 2 days after she blew up her whole life. Who does that? Who? And she couldn't finish. The Warner was standing right there. She was standing 3 feet away and she looked at a woman asking her to feed her son, and she saw a monster. Day 8, I went to the courthouse for the storage paperwork. Della Trombley, county recorder, 30 years in that chair. She typed my name and frowned. Huh, she said. There's another one on here. Another what? Quitclaim deed. She spun the monitor. Bell Road parcel. Filed 2 years ago. And I looked at the screen and the world stopped. Marin Elise Vaughn, grantor. Grady Ellis Winslow, grantee. All right, title and interest. She'd signed her name off my land. All of it. Forever, so that no bank, no lawyer, no court, no judgment, nothing on this earth could ever reach those 41 acres. And then I saw the date. I want you to hear the date. The deed was filed the day before she filed for divorce. She protected the land first. Then she killed the marriage. Same afternoon. That order. She walked into this building and made absolutely certain my grandfather's trees were safe. And then she drove to a lawyer's office and destroyed the only life she'd ever wanted, because she couldn't do the second thing until the first thing was done. I must have made a sound, because Della got quiet. I remember her, she said. I looked up, sat right there. Della pointed at a green vinyl chair by the window, signed it, and then she just sat. 20 minutes maybe. Didn't move, didn't cry, just sat. Della's voice went funny. I asked was she all right, and she said, she stopped. Say it, I said. She said, I'm all right. I'm just doing the last nice thing I'll ever get to do for somebody. I walked out of that courthouse into the sun, and I could not breathe. 2 years. 2 years of a whole town telling me a story. 2 years of my brother's blanket and my mother's casserole and 11 people laughing in a diner. And underneath all of it, the truth had been sitting in a green vinyl chair by a window, not moving, for 20 minutes. I was standing in the parking lot when Dell's truck pulled in. She rolled down the window and she looked at my face, and she knew. She just knew. You found the deed, she said. I couldn't answer. Dell looked straight ahead through her windshield for a second. Then she said something that took my legs out. She leaves on the 30th. The world tilted. What? Rented a truck. It's already half loaded. Dell's jaw was working. She's done, Grady. The debt's zero. Paid the last of it in March. Mom's gone. The bakery's gone. This town's got its story about her and it's never giving it back. She finally turned and looked at me. She's not running. She's finished. There's nothing left here she's allowed to have. The 30th, I said. The 30th. 9 days for the storage unit. 9 days until her truck pulled out of Rowan Falls forever. The same day. Of course it was the same day. And that's when I remembered what was still in the back of Unit 114, under the moving blanket. The thing I'd been walking past for 8 days and pretending not to see. It was under a moving blanket at the very back of Unit 114. I'd walked past it 8 days in a row and pretended I couldn't see the shape of it. I pulled the blanket off. Black walnut, 2 inches thick, 6'8", 3 foot wide, 3 panels, hand-cut mortises. Everything joined, everything true, and not one drop of finish on it. Unsanded, raw, exactly where I'd stopped. My grandfather planted that tree in 1961. He was 26 years old, and he stuck a walnut sapling in the ground on the north end of Bell Road, and my grandmother told him he was an idiot, because a man doesn't live long enough to use a walnut he plants. He said, not for me, Peg. The storm took it in 2013. Big one. Took the power out for 9 days. And I stood out there in the mud at 27 years old, looking at 70 feet of black walnut lying across my grandfather's fence line, and I cried, and then I milled it, dried it 4 years. And when I married Marin Vaughn, I started building a door out of it. I never finished it. 6 years. 6 years married in a house I built with my own 2 hands, with a cheap hollow core slab hung on the front that you could put your fist through. $60 at the hardware store. Temporary. It became a joke between us. A house isn't a house till the door's hung. I said it constantly. I said it to other men on other people's job sites, like I was some kind of philosopher. And every winter she'd say, Grady, the door. And I'd say, it's not ready. It was ready. It was ready in the 2nd year. And I want to tell you the truth about that, because it's the only thing that makes any of this make sense. I never finished that door, because finishing it would have meant I got to keep it. The house, the land, the woman. A boy who grew up watching his father's truck get smaller does not learn how to keep things. He learns how to expect the ending. And somewhere in the back of me, in a place I could not get to with words, I believed that if I never hung the good door, if I left one thing unfinished, then the story wasn't over yet, so nobody could take it. So I left a hole in my own house for 6 years. And she left me in 4 seconds of arithmetic. 2 people so scared of being given something that we both burned it down from opposite ends. I put my hand on that raw walnut in a storage unit on Route 9, and it was warm, the way walnut always is. like it still got something living in it. She kept the door. Everything she sold, her mother's house, the bakery, her car she should have sold, her lunch, and she paid $118 a month for 2 years to keep a door I refused to finish. She was keeping it for the day I could. I got that thing in my truck by myself. 210 pounds. I don't know how. I tore something in my shoulder and I didn't notice for a week, and I drove to Bell Road with the sun going down and about 14 hours until a rental truck pulled out of Rowan Falls forever. Here's what she didn't know. All week, those 8 days of not talking, of passing cast iron hand to hand, she thought we were moving that shop into my barn. We weren't. Every night after she went to her shift, I'd been driving it up the hill, to the pad, the old concrete pad where Ellis Winslow's shop stood for 51 years before I let a stranger haul it away in an afternoon. I'd been rebuilding it for 8 days in the dark like a thief. Posts up, rafters up, roof on Tuesday. I'm a timber framer. It's the one thing on God's earth I can actually do, but a man does not frame a shop alone in 8 days. So at 9 o'clock that night I stood in the middle of it, with a bare bulb swinging and a door in my truck in 14 hours, and I understood that I was going to fail. And that's when headlights came up Bell Road. Deke got out of his truck and didn't say anything. He walked into that shop and he looked at the walls, at the racks, her cheap pine racks, that I'd taken apart and hauled up here board by board, because I wasn't building new ones, because those were hers, and he saw the notebook on the bench. He picked it up. I said, "Deke, don't." He read. I watched my brother's face while he read about a marking gauge and a dead man scribing a line in the dark, and I watched him get to the part where a woman writes down that her husband cried and pretended it was sawdust, and I watched Deke Winslow put that notebook down very carefully, like it might go off. He stood there with his back to me a long time. "She came to Mom's porch," he said. "Yeah." "She asked Mom to feed you." "Yeah." My brother put his hands on his head. "I brought you a blanket," he said, and his voice broke clean in half. "I've been so proud of that blanket, Grady. 2 years. Like it made me somebody." Deke. She was skipping lunch. He turned around and his face was wrecked. For 2 years. So a dead man's tools wouldn't go in a dumpster. And I made a joke about her in a diner. I made a joke and 11 people laughed. And you know what I did after? I felt good. I felt like I'd stuck up for my brother. He was really crying now. "I didn't stick up for you," he said. "I just found somebody it was safe to hate." And I said the truest thing I've ever said to my brother. "So did I." He wiped his face with the back of his wrist. Then he looked up at the rafters, and he was Deke again. And he said, "How long we got?" "Till morning." Then quit crying and hand me a hammer. At 10:15, my mother's car came up the hill. She got out with a thermos, and she didn't say a word about the shop or the door or any of it. She just poured coffee into the plastic cup and put it in my hands and made me drink it. Then she said, "What do you need?" "Mom, it's 10 at night. Grady Winslow." Both hands, flat, on the tailgate. "I told that girl to get off my porch. You give me something to carry." So I gave her something to carry. At 11, Otis and the crew came, because Deke called them, because Deke is Deke. At midnight, Ruth Ann Pike arrived with 3 pies and a folding chair, and directed traffic like a woman who'd been waiting 81 years to be needed. By 1 in the morning, there were 19 vehicles on Bell Road. By 2, there were 31. I don't know how it moved through that town. I've stopped asking. Small towns are a nervous system. You touch it in one place, and the whole thing knows. But I'll tell you what I think happened. I think a town got told the truth at midnight and realized it had been eating that woman's pie for 2 years. Dell came at 3. She stood in the doorway of that shop and looked at the walls. Every tool up, in the order her sister wrote them down. Because that ledger was the blueprint. That ledger had always been the blueprint. And Dell Vaughn put her hand over her mouth and made a sound I'll hear till I die. "You're not going to be able to do this," she said. "I know. She leaves at 9. I know." Dell looked at the door lying across 2 sawhorses, raw, unfinished. 210 pounds of a promise a man made and never kept. "Then stop talking to me," she said. "And sand." I sanded that door for 4 hours. 80 grid, 120, 180, 220, on my knees, shoulder screaming. Walnut dust going black and fine as smoke in the work lights. and it smells like nothing else on this earth. Sweet and sharp, like cocoa and pepper. And every time I dragged that paper, the grain came up out of the dark like something rising, purple and brown and gold. 65 years of a man's patience in a piece of wood. Not for me, Peg. Somebody put a sandwich in my hand at 4 and I ate it without looking up. Oil at 5. 2 coats, hand-rubbed, and that walnut went from dead to alive, like somebody threw a switch. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, with the sky going gray over the tree line, I did one more thing. I opened the chisel roll. 9 chisels where there should be 10. I've looked for that 1/4 inch for 24 years. I looked for it as a boy on my hands and knees in the sawdust, and I looked for it as a man in every drawer of that shop, and I never told my grandfather, and he died, and I never told him. She knew. She wrote it down. He still looks for it. I put the roll back, and then I took a piece of hickory off the rack, from the tree that came down the year my father's truck got smaller, and I put it on that 1937 lathe, and I turned a mallet. Took 20 minutes. G says a man should make his own mallet at least once. G has not made one. I don't think G knows he hasn't. I knew now. I hung that door at 7:14 in the morning with a mallet I made myself, and 31 people from Rowan Falls, Ohio, stood on my grandfather's grass in the cold and watched a man finally finish something. It swung true. First try, it swung so true it whispered, and I stood there with my hand on the frame, 2 fingers, checking a pulse, the way I do, the way she saw me do for 6 years, when I thought nobody in the world was looking, and I understood that I had built a house at 29 years old, and it had never once been a house. Not until that minute. Not until a woman who never loved me kept the door. She was standing on Persimmon Street at 8:40, with a box in her arms. The truck was loaded. The little green car was on a tow dolly behind it. Somebody had already put a sold sign in the laundromat window. She saw my truck, and she stopped walking. I got out. I had walnut dust in every crease of my hands, and I hadn't slept, and I had oil on my shirt. She looked at me, and her face did the saddest thing I've ever seen. It got ready. Grady, she said, please don't. 1 hour. Don't do this to me on the sidewalk. Marin. My voice came out like gravel. 1 hour. Then I'll drive you back here myself, and I'll put that box in the truck with my own hands, and I'll wave at you when you go, and I will never knock on another door of yours, as long as I live. I swear it on Ellis. She stood there in the cold, with her whole life in a cardboard box, and she said, okay, that word again, but different this time. I heard it. Not okay, it's over. Okay, 1 more hour. She got in my truck. Neither of us said anything the whole way. She realized where we were going at the county line, and I felt her go rigid in that seat. She put her hand on the door handle. She actually put her hand on the handle, at 50 miles an hour, and I saw her do it, and I did not slow down. Up Bell Road. Past the tree line she said was dirt. And around the bend, the shop was standing. Ellis Winslow's shop, on Ellis Winslow's pad. Roof on, windows in, doors open. And through those doors, on the walls, in the exact order she'd written down in a notebook, in a room I wasn't in, every single tool. Marin Vaughn made a sound like she'd been hit. She got out of that truck before it stopped rolling. She got about 4 steps and her legs quit, and she went down on the grass on her knees, with her hands over her face, and I stood there and let her, because there was nothing on this earth I could have said. 31 people's tire tracks in the mud, all around her. She got up. She was shaking so hard she couldn't stand straight, and that's when she turned and saw the house, and saw the door. Black walnut, hung, finished, catching the morning sun like something out of a church. 6'8" of the thing I could not make myself deserve for 6 years. She said my name, just my name. It came out in pieces, and I said, come here. We stood on that porch, her and me, and a door. And I said the thing I'd been walking toward for 2 years and 9 days, and I made my voice as steady as I could. You never asked me. She was crying so hard she couldn't answer. 2 years ago you sat in a room I wasn't in, I said, and you did the math, and you decided. And you never asked me, Grady. So you're going to ask me now. She shook her head. Out loud, I said, standing right there. The land or you? Ask me. And she couldn't. She stood in front of that door with her mouth open, and nothing came out. And I watched it. I watched a woman try to lift something and find out it weighed more than she did, because she'd spent 730 days knowing she wasn't worth the answer. She'd built a whole life out of that. She'd built that certainty like a house and lived in it. And I was asking her to walk out the front. She said, "I can't. Ask me. Grady, I can't. Ask me." And here's the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I waited. I stood there, and I did not save her. Because a lesser man rescues her right then. A lesser man says, "Never mind. It's okay. I'll just tell you." And gives her the answer as a gift. The way she gave me my whole life as a gift. In a room I wasn't in. And calls it love. No. She made me be nothing for 2 years. She was going to be brave for 30 seconds. The wind came across the tree line. Her mother's ring wasn't on her hand. She'd sold it. I found that out later. For $400. In Marysville. To a man who didn't look up. And Marin Vaughn lifted her head. And she said it. "Grady." Barely a sound. "The land, or me?" And I said, "You." Her face came apart. "It was you in 4 seconds." I said. 4 seconds, Marin. You counted them. You just counted them wrong. You thought 4 seconds meant I didn't think about it. I put my hand on that walnut. 4 seconds meant I didn't have to. Then I did the last thing. I took the key out of my pocket, and I put it in her hand, and I closed her fingers around it, and I walked off my own porch. Grady. No. I kept walking. I've had it done to me. Somebody decided my life for me in a room I wasn't in, and told me it was for my own good, and I would not do that to a dog, and I will not do it to you. I got to the grass and turned around. She was standing under that door, with a key in her fist. 34 years old. A rented truck idling 9 miles away. "That's your house," I said. "It's got a door on it now. And I'm not standing here making that face at you until you say what I want to hear. That's the same crime, Marin. It just looks nicer. Where are you going?" I pointed up the hill. "At the shop. 100 yards away. Lights on, door open. I'll be in there," I said. "You know what I want? It's yours if you knock." And I walked away from the only thing I've ever wanted. Across 100 yards of my grandfather's grass. And I did not look back. And it was the hardest walk of my life. I sat on that bench for 4 hours. 4 hours. 9 o'clock came and went. 10. 11. I sat in my dead grandfather's shop with his tools on the wall, in her handwriting's order, and I did not move. And about the 3rd hour I understood that I had gotten it wrong. That I'd been too proud and too cruel and too right, and that being right was going to cost me everything all over again. 12:40. The truck was gone by now. Had to be. And I put my head down on that bench, on the burn mark shaped like Ohio, and I finally let myself feel the whole 2 years at once. And that's when I heard it. A knock. On Ellis Winslow's door. And I lifted my head. And I want you to understand what happened in that shop, because it's the only reason I'm telling you any of this. I opened that door like I'd been waiting 2 years. She was standing there in the sun. Walnut dust on her hands from touching the door. She'd touched it. She'd stood there and touched it the way I do. 2 fingers, checking a pulse. She had the green notebook under her arm, a pencil behind her ear, and she was holding something out to me in her other hand. A chisel, 1/4 inch, old steel, rosewood handle, 1937. I couldn't breathe. "It's not his," she said. I looked. "Grady, I looked for 2 years. I called every auction. She stopped and gathered herself. "It's not his. It's just the same year. The same maker. I found it in March. In Kentucky." She put it in my hand. "It's not the same one," she said. "But there's 10. She stayed. Of course she stayed. That's the ending you already knew was coming. And I don't care, because the ending was never the point. The point was the 100 yards. But I'll give you one more picture, because you've earned it. A year later, there's a sign on the barn at the bottom of Bell Road now. Hand-painted, blue, and it says Vaughn's, because Odile Vaughn's bakery came home. 60 feet from a shop that came home. And Ruth Ann Pike does not buy pie out of the back of a car anymore. Ruth Ann Pike sits in a chair by the window, with her name carved into the arm of it, and she is unbearable about it. Deke does the deliveries. Won't take gas money. Won't discuss it. My mother works the counter on Saturdays. She and Marin have never once talked about the porch. They don't need to. I watched my mother touch that girl's hair one time going past, and I had to walk outside. And on the front of the house at the top of the hill, there's a black walnut door from a tree a 26-year-old man planted in 1961 for somebody he'd never meet. Not for me, Peg. It swings true, and on the other side of it, there's a woman who has never once in her life asked who's knocking. Because she figured something out in a room above a laundromat that took me 36 years to learn. You don't get to decide who's worth the door. You just have to open it. So here's what I want to leave you with. And I want you to actually sit with it, not scroll past it. Marin Vaughn spent 2 years being hated by everyone she loved because she believed she was worth less than what she could give away. And here's the uncomfortable part. She wasn't a villain. She wasn't even wrong about the land. She was wrong about one thing. She believed love meant carrying it alone. That the highest form of loving somebody is to take the hard thing, do it in a room they're not in, and never let them see the cost. We call that being strong. We call it protecting people. We tell our kids it's noble, but it isn't love. It's control with good manners on. Because when you decide for someone, even to save them, you're telling them they're not strong enough to stand next to you in the worst hour of your life. And that's not protection. That's the loneliest thing one person can do to another. So my question for you, and I mean this, who are you protecting right now by not telling them the truth? And be honest, are you protecting them? Or are you protecting yourself from finding out what they'd choose? Somebody in your life is standing on the other side of a door you decided not to open. You did the math in a room they weren't in. You already know their answer. You don't. Go knock. If this story reached something in you, if you thought about somebody while you were listening, do me one favor. Tap the bell. Not the like. The bell. Because most people watch a story like this, feel something real for 10 minutes, and then let the algorithm decide whether they ever feel it again. Don't leave that up to a machine. If these stories are worth your time, turn the notifications on so you don't miss the next one. And in the comments, tell me one thing. Was Marin right to do what she did? Because I've told this story 100 times, and that room splits every single time. Half the people say she was the most loving woman they've ever heard of. Half say she broke his heart and called it kindness. I want to know which one you are. I'll be reading every single one.